that's pretty cool. Incredible. Ooh, now this is cool. Until I prepped for this video, I don't even remember hearing about this news. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Austin Chang, and today in this video, we're gonna be talking about the biggest health stories of the past year, which you may have missed because of everything else that was going on in the world, including the biggest health story, COVID-19, obviously. And to that end, I'm also happy to report that I just got the coronavirus vaccine a couple days ago. That's gonna be a whole entire different video. But the first fun fact about that some of you might not have known is that the iconic Dolly Parton actually helped contribute to the research of one of the vaccines. She actually donated $1 million to the research behind the Moderna vaccine, which has since been rolled out and hopefully will be available to everyone soon. I don't want to forget about some of the diseases that we learned more about because of the passing of some of our public figures, and that includes Chadwick Boseman, who died of colon cancer, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Alex Trebek, who had pancreatic cancer. And part of the reason why I'm not going to talk about it too much in this video is because A, I've already made videos about this, and B, there's so much more to these people than their diagnoses, but I do have to credit them with raising a ton of awareness about their conditions, which we as a medical field probably wouldn't have done as good of a job without their help. So I have in front of me a list of the groundbreaking health stories over the past year that you may have missed that I've tried to compile from various sources, and without further ado, let's get right into it. In no particular order, by the way. So I do have to admit that some of these news stories are covering areas outside of my wheelhouse, but I do think that they deserve a lot more attention that they would have gotten probably if we hadn't had the pandemic going on. Now this is cool. So this past year we saw the approval of 2 new Ebola virus treatments. Now I don't know if you guys remember this, but a couple years ago we had a whole moment where we were concerned about an Ebola virus outbreak here in the US. And after the introduction of the first vaccine in December of 2019, this past year we saw the first 2 approved Ebola virus treatments, the first of which is a collection of 3 different antibodies marketed under the brand name Inmazeb. And because mortality rates for the Ebola virus can approach up to 90%, it's pretty cool that in trials, these medications were able to bring down that mortality rate to around 30% and even lower for those with low viral loads. It seems like in November of 2020, they declared the 11th outbreak of the Ebola virus in the Democratic Republic of Congo as officially over, but we still have a long way to go with Ebola virus, it seems. But it seems like we've made a tremendous amount of progress over the past year with the Ebola virus, so here's to hoping that we won't see any more outbreaks anytime soon. Ooh, the weekly insulin shot. So there was a study that came out in the New England Journal of Medicine that I saw where they were comparing a potential new weekly insulin shot versus a daily insulin shot for those who are suffering from diabetes. A lot of people with diabetes are dependent on insulin to control their blood sugars, and it can be really taxing to have to deliver insulin, not only those daily doses, but also mealtime doses as well. So this once weekly insulin treatment called ICODEC was similar in its ability to lower blood sugar and in its safety profile to daily doses of insulin. And I can see how this could be a huge improvement to the quality of life of people suffering with diabetes who have to keep injecting themselves with insulin every single day. So that's pretty cool. Kind of along the same lines of consolidating medications and convenience for patients is a POLYPILL that was investigated for heart disease. So there was a trial looking at a POLYPILL, which is basically a fancy word for a pill that contains multiple different medications. In this case, simvastatin, a cholesterol medication, atenolol, hydrochlorothiazide, and ramipril, which are all blood pressure medications. These 4 medications wrapped into one, plus aspirin, led to less cardiovascular deaths than the POLYPILL alone or aspirin alone, which is pretty cool. So I can see pros and cons of POLYPILLs. Some people might have reasons where they're not able to take a certain medication in the POLYPILL, in which case this option would be off the table, but other people might actually benefit from the convenience of not having to take a bunch of different pills at each time, which can lead to confusion, which can lead to other errors in how doctors are prescribing. And it also seems like people were followed up for 5 years on average. And 5 years is a pretty good amount of time because if you don't measure for long enough, you might not pick up on the effects that the medication has on mortality. All right, moving on. Now, I don't know how many of you heard, but the Nobel Prize for Medicine this year was awarded to the people who discovered the hepatitis C virus. And now I can speak to this a little bit because I'm a gastroenterologist, but 2.4 million people are estimated to be living with chronic hepatitis C infection here in the United States. many of whom probably don't even know they have it. The Nobel Prize is often awarded years later after the contributions of the scientists, but with the discovery of the hepatitis C virus, they were then able to develop the test for it. Then we were able to detect more of it, and we were then able to develop a treatment for it. And I think we all have to remember that this happened in a relatively short amount of time. In the early 90s, that's when we started testing for hepatitis C, and that's when the first treatments came out, and the efficacy of those treatments were less than 10% effective in actually achieving a quote-unquote cure for the virus. And since 2014 or so, we've been able to have treatments that have effectiveness upwards of 95% in curing this virus, which is amazing. So if we're able to continue testing for and treating this virus over the next 5-10 years, who knows, we might not see very much of hepatitis C and all its downstream effects in the future, which would be incredible. Now, if you found any value out of this video so far, please consider subscribing below by clicking the red subscribe button. It would really help me out in getting this information out to more people. In August, wild polio was declared eradicated in Africa. I think we all missed that. And looking back at this, back in 1996, 75,000 kids were newly paralyzed because of polio in Africa. And with vaccine efforts and improvement in infrastructure and whatnot in Africa, it's pretty awesome that now they've been able to declare wild polio as totally eradicated in the continent. If only we could eradicate coronavirus. Also in 2020 was the first blood test for Alzheimer's disease. Now, I don't think the FDA has granted full approval of this. I think it's given it like breakthrough distinction or something. But the fact of the matter is that this blood test is able to detect the types of misformed proteins that leads to Alzheimer's in the brain. Now, Alzheimer's is a disease of the brain, but like so many other diseases, we're constantly looking for clues in the bloodstream that we can potentially pick up with a simple blood test. And what I think the way this test works, which is called PrecivityAD, but it's a test that picks up 2 different isoforms of the amyloid beta protein, as well as ApoE specific peptides in the blood, which this test is then able to calculate the probability of having Alzheimer's disease. CRISPR for sickle cell disease. Now, in my medical career thus far, I've seen a lot of patients suffer from sickle cell disease, which is a disease that affects hundreds of thousands of people here in the US. It's an inherited disease where the red blood cells that carry oxygen in your blood are misformed, so these patients chronically just don't have enough of those blood cells to carry oxygen around their body. It can not only be super painful because you're not getting enough oxygen to your muscles, but it can also be pretty dangerous as well. This type of treatment that was introduced this year is called CRISPR, which I don't know a whole lot about, but I do know that it involves gene editing, which is particularly important for patients suffering from a genetic disease like sickle cell disease. So the next medical breakthrough that I've got here is a treatment for thyroid eye disease. So some patients suffer from Graves' disease and have an overactive thyroid called hyperthyroidism. And one of the side effects from that is bulging eyes. And this medication, Tepezza, I think it's called, actually reduces the muscle and fat swelling around the eyes that causes the eyes to bulge, which not only affects the patient's appearance, but also their quality of life because it ultimately may affect their vision as well. Oh, the other big news story, the lawsuit with PURDUE Pharmaceuticals. So this company developed OxyContin, a narcotic medication that has basically been at the center of our opioid crisis here in the US. And my understanding of this whole situation is that this company basically pled guilty to fueling the opioid crisis, sometimes through doctors, by influencing them and having them write more and more prescriptions of this narcotic pain medication. And now, as a doctor in 2021, I'm being monitored for how much narcotic pain medication I prescribe with good reason, because now we understand its addictive potential and the dangers that people face with overdosing on these medications and its impact on our society as a whole. So despite the fact that they are being ordered to pay up over $8 billion, which they probably won't be able to because I think they're bankrupt at this point, it's not going to make up for the thousands and thousands of people who have lost their lives to opioid overdoses, or the people who continue to suffer from addiction to narcotic pain medications, and has an effect not only on the patients themselves, but everyone around them, their loved ones, their family members, who have to suffer the consequences of everything that this pharmaceutical company has done. Amazon Pharmacy. Now, I know a couple years ago they bought PillPack, which is a company that could package all the medications in individual packets, but basically Amazon Pharmacy now allows people to purchase medications and fill their prescriptions through Amazon. And I know that they've been marketing this whole thing as having up to 80% in discounts for like generic medications if you're a Prime member. But there's been a lot of criticism about Amazon Pharmacy, just like Amazon as a whole. Aside from the issue of monopolizing more things, people have said that the pricing actually isn't as competitive as it's made out to be, but more importantly, it doesn't really address the bigger issue at hand, which is the mess of a health system that we have and the lack of transparency with pharmaceutical drug pricing. That said, I think that there are still limitations as to what Amazon can do over the internet versus your local pharmacies, especially for people who have really complicated prescriptions. But I can see how this could really improve accessibility for people who might not be able to leave their house as easily, for people who might not live near a pharmacy, who don't have that type of accessibility that other people have, may actually benefit from something like this. Now, this isn't a medical news story per se, but carbon emissions fell by 7% in the past year, which is, I think, record-shattering levels or something like that. But this is important to bring up because the environment definitely has an impact on our health, whether it's the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, our ability to go outside. And so we might not see an immediate health benefit from something like this. And although this is a temporary drop, until we're all able to go out again, travel more easily, have manufacturing and industry back up at full speed, at least it's one of the more positive things that came out of the past year. Now, I don't think this video would be complete without mentioning what we've learned about racial disparities in healthcare. Now, this topic is very broad and I'm not gonna get too much into it, but to say that we can see how there are racial disparities in healthcare using COVID-19 as an example. When it comes to differences for Black individuals in exposure to the virus, severity of the disease, hospitalizations, or even death rates. So with that said, all the awareness that we've had with regards to racial disparities here in the US, hopefully we'll be able to make changes to dismantle a lot of that systemic racism. Like I said, I probably left out tons of news stories from the past year, but hopefully this was a good place to start. If you felt that there were other medical news stories that deserved lots more attention, please leave them in the comment section below. I would love for other people to see them as well. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It would really help me out. And don't forget to subscribe below by clicking the red subscribe button and turning on the notifications bell to be notified every time I post a new video. If you'd like to follow me on social media, I'm on virtually every platform at Austin Chang MD. I'll leave all the links down below in the description box. But until next time, Happy New Year. Please stay safe and I will see you in my next video. Bye.